Hey everyone, welcome back to the Next Brave Step podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Wise, and I'm wearing these headphones even though I really didn't need to have them on still. So I'm going to go ahead and take them off. Anyways, in this episode, we are going to be diving into something that keeps so many of us stuck in the long run, and that is overthinking. So if you've ever hesitated to start because you're worried that it won't be perfect, this episode is exactly for you. Now, I want to talk about when I was first thinking about launching this podcast. Now, I spent weeks, it was probably more like months, over analyzing every little detail from the name to the format to the tech to the lighting. I felt so stuck. I was so worried about getting it wrong that I didn't even start for such a long time. But here's what I realized. Messy imperfection taught me so much more than months of planning ever could. So today we're unpacking why overthinking holds us back and why action, no matter how small or how messy, is the fastest way to grow. By the way, at the end of this episode, you will have 3 simple steps to take your first brave action step today, along with a free resource tool that I made especially for you called Take the Leap. Your first brave step starts here. All right, guys, let's go ahead and dig into the episode. Hello, and welcome to the Next Brave Step podcast, the podcast that's all about turning dreams into action. I'm your host, Chelsea Wise. Now, this podcast is more than just something to listen to while you fold laundry. Instead, imagine I'm inviting you to join me in my kitchen, a space for genuine and transformative conversations. Here, with the sunlight streaming through the windows, margaritas and homemade guac on the table, we're ready to dive into stories and strategies that don't just inspire you to think about a better life, but give you the tools, motivations to go out there and make it happen. So pull up a chair, let's talk like old friends, and together we'll navigate the journey from turning dreaming into doing, one brave step at a time. Your adventure towards making your dreams a reality starts right here. Okay, so why do we overthink? And the problem really, what is the problem with overthinking? So overthinking gives us this false sense of productivity. It really feels like a lot of progress, but it is really just fear dressed up as preparation. So what are the reasons that we are overthinking? Oftentimes it is the fear of failure or the fear of judgment, wanting everything to be perfect before we start. And that feeling can be really overwhelming by the number of steps involved in launching a new business or creating a new product or starting a podcast. So when we overthink, you stall. And that space of inaction is really where you start to miss these opportunities. You miss these opportunities for growth. You miss opportunities to learn from the process. Imagine waiting so long to pitch your idea to a client that someone else beats you to it. Overthinking creates this gap where opportunities really start to just slip away from us. Now, Elizabeth Gilbert talks about this in her book called Big Magic. Essentially, inside the book, she's talking about this concept that ideas, products, books ideas, all these creative things are kind of floating around in the air with us. And they either pick us or we latch onto them, and it's our job to make them a reality. But when we get stuck in that overthinking and inaction stage, those ideas can kind of just leave us and go find someone else who's actually going to turn them into reality. Now, I know this sounds a little bit woo-woo, so stick with me here. If you are interested at all, if that piqued your curiosity, even just a little bit, I encourage you to read the book, Big Magic. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit how just starting is really the only way to beat overthinking. So taking any action at all starts to create this thing called a momentum. Now, when we start to have momentum, we start to build confidence. So as you move forward, you get more clarity and you learn what works and what doesn't work. In fact, clarity doesn't come from thinking at all. It actually comes from doing. So when I finally stopped obsessing over every little detail and just hit record on my first podcast episode, it was not perfect. I re-recorded the first episode probably 5 or 6 times. I didn't have video because video really wasn't super a thing then, and it took a lot of trial and error, but it was real. And that step opened the door for everything since. And honestly, I had no business pitching myself to some of my very first guests on the podcast. but you know what? It worked. And some of those interviews that I hosted at the very beginning of my show are still some of my most downloaded episodes. So I want to encourage you. Here's the truth. You don't have to have it all figured out. Starting imperfectly is how you figure it out. And every step forward, no matter how small, is a win. That's kind of what the whole next brave step thing is all about. That's what this podcast is all about. It's taking imperfect action to move forward. So let's make this simple. How can you actually start today without overthinking? I want you to pick one small thing, one tiny little thing. And if you're starting a creative business, maybe you could post one photo of your work online or write down 3 people that you could reach out to. Now, what I want you to do after you pick that one thing is I want you to set a timer for 20 minutes. And in those 20 minutes, take action without letting yourself overthink. So call the people, send the email, post the image of your product. No matter how small it seems, you've moved forward, and that is worth celebrating. Remember, that first step does not have to be perfect. It just has to be done. Perfection is not the goal here. Progress is. So if you want even more support, I want to encourage you to jump into the show notes below and grab the download, Take the Leap. It's basically going to walk you through how to identify your next step and how to take that action constantly. Now, one last thing I want to encourage you to do. And what is one small... Okay, so this has been a pretty short episode. I want you to think about what is one brave step that you can take today. Write it down. Go ahead and pull over on the side of the road, get out your notes app on your phone and write it down. Make the commitment. Action beats overthinking every single time. Now, I would love to hear about what steps it is that you are taking in your business and your life. Go ahead and send me a DM on Instagram or tag me in a post and let's celebrate your bravery together. Next week, we're going to be tackling imposter syndrome, the feeling that you're not good enough. And next week, we are tackling imposter syndrome. That's the feeling that you're not really good enough to go after your dreams. So if you've ever struggled with self-doubt, you won't want to miss next week's episode. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Next Brave Step podcast. Remember, action beats overthinking every single time. You don't need to have an entire plan to take the next brave step, and you have got this. I believe in you. Now, don't forget to grab your free guide, Take the Leap. Your first brave step starts here. You can get that in the show notes below. Now, make sure that you share this episode with someone who might need it. We also would love it if you can subscribe and rate the show because that's really how we push this out to more people just like you. I cannot wait to see where your brave steps take. I can't wait to see where your next brave step takes you. That wraps up today's episode of The Next Brave Step. I've truly enjoyed having you join me on this journey. Here at The Next Brave Step, we don't just talk about our dreams, we take bold actions towards them every day. Stay connected by hitting that subscribe button and dive even deeper with us by becoming part of the Next Brave Step Insiders group on Facebook. Let the insights and energy from today's conversation ignite your next brave step forward. Remember, every small step is a vital part of your incredible journey. So get out there and take that next step forward. You're never alone. I'll be right here cheering you on. I'll see you in the next episode.